I'm out here today in the woods looking to scout out a trail into our back quarter, the northeast 5 acres, an area that has some old, circa 1920, channels in the ground. I'm pretty sure they tried to drain that area at that time, and it failed and they gave up. And this property has been allowed to go back to an unmanaged woodland since that time. I've done some work along here clearing a trail already, but I want to figure out how to continue this back into that quadrant. I've got plans to start turning that 5 acres into a coppice and do some more interesting things in that area. Right up here in front of us, you see that multi-stem fella right there. Basically past that, this area will flood pretty consistently. And so I have thoughts of making a large pond in this part of the property that will perhaps drain a little and give some of our excess water a place to be. And I want to run that from the power line cut, which is up here to our right, down to someplace in here. If you look over this way, there's a large white pine right there, goes up in branches, and you might notice that it's on a bit of a mound, and I'm thinking that somewhere around that is the northern limit of the pond that would run through here. So that tells us that we kind of need a trail that doesn't go past here and stays on the inside of that pine on the other side of the oak there. But that means something along these lines. Looking at the size of trees here, it probably makes more sense to turn north here rather than go a little bit further. I'm going to take out the smaller trees and the smallest number in order to get to where we want to be. So let's head in this way and see what it looks like. I haven't done the measurements to figure out just how overgrown we are here, but I'm pretty sure that this is an overgrown woodland and needs a fair bit of thinning out. It hasn't been managed for 100 years. Over here is the area that I want to have as an outdoor classroom and a greenwood working area, things like that. I've made a clearing and there's another path that leads in there. But this trail might pass nearby, and that's okay. Just kind of looking for a path of least resistance, least disruptive course. I'm not too worried about taking down snags like this because we've got an awful lot of them in here. There's another one right there. And another one dead ahead there. Pretty much every time I come out into the woods, I find another round of windfall, things that have come down. This is a little channel right here that we're walking in now, a little low-lying area, which might not be the best for a trail because it's going to get flooded. We definitely have classic forest pit and mound kind of topography here. And here you can see it's January and we have open standing water, unfrozen. I don't remember that one being down, and that's another hazard. I might be smarter to take a trail that goes up on the western side and comes over rather than one that tries to come to the east and head in, because there is all of this water and it tends to come and go, but could make it pretty hard to travel from point A to point B. So we're still trying to find a way back to that quarter. Like I say, this is a mixed hardwood forest. We've got oak, we've got maple, we've got some white pine, we have some big leaf aspen, we have lots of sassafras as an understory kind of tree. We've got some black cherry that just doesn't get very big. At about 10-inch diameter, it dies. There are a few small beeches. I haven't found any evidence of any of the beeches on our site making nuts yet. More snags. It is, on the one hand, just too wet, and on the other hand, they're making do. So the undergrowth is dominated by smilax, which I find not at all helpful. Thorny, hard to get through. Climbs the trees and does not do them any favors. A plant I don't have a lot of fondness for. The shoots are tasty. Have to cook for at least 15 minutes or they're just still too fibrous to deal with. But steamed for 15 minutes and the young shoots are a pleasant little vegetable. There's just no way that we can control it by eating it all. I'd like to get goats in and get their help. And up here is another example of what I mean about windfalls. This one's been here for a bit. Not terribly long, but a bit. And it's a perfect example of how the pit and mound structure comes to pass. Our soil here is almost exclusively sand. There's effectively no clay content to it. Here where the forest has been dropping material for 100 years, we've got organic matter 18 inches deep, but there's effectively no structure to it. And so it gets awfully wet, and the winds pick up, and the tree goes over. And then over the course of time, there's your mound, and there's your pit. Vice versa. There's your mound, and there's your pit. We have an area on the northwestern quarter of the property that in the spring summer becomes an absolute jungle of ferns. Unfortunately, there are not any of them an edible variety for people, so it's not terribly useful to me, but they do seem to dominate over the smilax in that area. Here we are still just trying to get back, and here we are. The canals begin over here. There's one that runs basically along the property line with our neighbor. It's one of my best guides to where I am on the property. And there are on the order of five or six of these, and they're seasonal. This will spread a good deal wider in more wet times, and it can fade down to almost nothing if we get a really dry spell. But that rarely happens. And here's another one. And they run pretty much due north into what historically appears to have been a county drain, but the county's abandoned it at this time. So as I said, I'm comfortable saying this was an attempt at draining the area, but it did not work, and they gave up. Come spring, this will be absolutely filled with wood nettle and a substantial amount of chickweed as well. Part of my plan involves connecting the southern ends of these canals in pairs, basically making a sequence of U shapes, or even rectangles if you count the drain across the north end. But by connecting the southern ends and putting a gate in across the drain that runs east-west on the northern edge, then we'll create the opportunity to push water back through the channels. And there's a Bolivian, I believe it is, technique called waru, where essentially they dig canals off of a water source and treat the space within these canals essentially as massive raised beds. And so you do a sort of flood irrigation using the channel. And here is possibly the last one, but an example of what these are like when the water level drops. This is the minimum that you'll ever see in one of these. They're always moist, but they may not always have standing water. And so the thought is to essentially clear cut this space, but with the intent of developing a coppice area. And most of these species will coppice. The larger trees are less likely to come back, but that's not necessarily a tragedy. I have a sawmill, and the logs from trees like this will get used for timber. Things that aren't so useful, I suspect this poor maple wouldn't make anything in the way of lumber, but it will make something in the way of raised beds, boundaries within the coppice. And so the idea is a bunch of perennial coppice trees and shrubs with perennial herbaceous layer, small fruit like raspberries, other kinds of berries, gooseberry, cranberry, etc., elderberry. And then as the coppice regrows, it'll outgrow low-level plants, it'll outgrow annual vegetable opportunities. You won't be able to do an annual vegetable garden when it shades out. But cyclically, I will be able to do a pulse of annual vegetables for a couple of years, have a constant flow of perennial fruit, vegetable, not small shrubs, herbaceous, things like wood nettle and the like. But as it cycles, the plants that need more sun will be shaded out by the returning coppice. The coppice will reach maturity and be harvested, and that cycle will begin all over again. And as part of that process, we're returning an awful lot of fertility with the coppice that we're dropping. And here's yet another example of something that has come down, and that's quite a potential hazard. Don't want to walk under that. The deadfall this season is looking kind of scary, actually. There's a lot of it. And some portion of these may be salvageable as timber, but if that's where this trunk came from, that much rot doesn't give a lot of hope for good quality wood out of it. I'll have to get out here with a saw and get into it and see. But again, I need a trail to bring the tractor through. this area got clobbered. That's kind of crazy. This went down. This went down in a different direction. That went the other way. This pine broke and came this way. Yeah. I wonder if that was a microburst or snow load or what. But up here, we're coming to the boundary of our property. Oh, there is another one over here, further to the west. Another canal. And I'm pretty sure this is the last one. There's one of the cherries that's about as big as they will get on this site. And over there, two more that are probably dying as I look at them. That's the biggest cherries that we get on this site before they die. So here we're coming up on the back edge of the property. That's me being tripped by the smilax. And so this is that drain I talked about. And it will be anything from a couple of feet wide or nothing like it is right now to kind of a braided complex that's 20 feet wide, or it'll just flood right across. Up there, as the land rises, it stops being a drain and becomes a two-track along the back of the neighbor's property. And on the other side, it's a wildlife refuge. And maybe you can see through the trees that there's a ridge over there. It jumps maybe 12 feet above the baseline. Elevation change back there is quite significant. The Department of Natural Resources has been out and refreshed their signage. Here we go, wildlife refuge, do not enter. Here are multiple new signs that help tell me, along with this ditch, that I have reached the back edge. And as can easily happen, I've sort of slid a little further in. I think this is really the one that I need to be guided by, but you can tell that it fades right out up there. So here we are, fighting through smilax and trying to step across the creek without falling in. I know it's nothing, but that side's theirs, this side's mine. It really helps minimize traffic onto our property to back up onto something that's just generally prohibited. Yeah, I'm going to have to take that one down. That's dangerous. Lots of stuff has come down this winter. I think I'm going to call it at that point And maybe we'll get you back out here when I start working to actually clear a trail, after I figure out where it's going to be.